Shabbat Shalom. I hope you're doing well and ready for another beautiful, relaxing summer Shabbat. Our Torah portion this week, Shoftim, speaks about leadership, amongst many other topics. It talks about the various functions and the forms of Jewish leadership. It speaks about the Shoftim, which are the judges. It speaks about the kings and the concept of a king. It speaks about the Kohen, about the high priest. And there's a fascinating law in terms of inheritance, how leadership is passed from one generation to the next. And Maimonides says, based on a verse in our Torah portion, the verse says, Hu uvanav bekerev Yisrael, he and his descendants, referring to the king, he and his descendants in the midst of Israel. It indicates that there's a special concept, that there's a special notion of the descendants of the king. And Maimonides says indeed that the king's descendants have the right of inheritance, that leadership is passed from one generation to the next. And then Maimonides says that that's true for many of the positions of leadership, with one notable exception. And that is that there was a priest, a Kohen Mashuach Milchama. There was a priest who was designated to lead the people in war, to lead them out to war, to provide spiritual guidance and direction as the people would go out to war. And Maimonides says that's the exception. That position is not transferred from one generation to the next. If there's a child, if there's a son who's a Kohen, who is eligible, who qualifies, he's not prohibited from taking the position, but he has no benefit over any of the other candidates by virtue of the fact that he is the son of the current office holder. Why that exception? And one interpretation has to do with a very Jewish concept, has to do with a very Jewish notion of optimism. When it comes to war, what's our core belief as one is fighting a war? Do we say, this is just another battle, and there will be more battles, and that's okay, that's just the way the world is? Or do we say that this battle is tragic and unfortunate, and it's our prayer and it's our belief that this will be the final battle that we'll have to fight, that wars will stop? That's what the belief is, that we are optimistic that peace will hold. And therefore, when it comes to transferring positions of leadership, yes, there is the concept of inheritance from one generation to the next in Jewish law. But when it comes to positions that relate to military, that relate to the war, there's no concept of inheritance, because those are the values, those are the characteristics that we hope are not necessary to pass from one generation to the next. I'm reminded a number of years ago I read a book about Jewish mobsters. The title of the book was But He Loves His Mother. And one of the concepts written in that book was very simply that one thing that differentiated the Jewish mob from other mafia and other mob was that others, the concept of bringing the children into the business was a very important concept. But for the Jewish mafia, they, as a general rule, of course there are always exceptions, kept their children away from that, didn't create a family business, did it as an unfortunate reality or whatever the justification was, but made sure that the children were not brought into that business. And I thought that was a beautiful or silver lining in a very strange and dark story about Jewish criminals, was the idea that we hope that the next generations are better than our generation and do better than our generation and don't have to resort perhaps to some of the things that previous generations resort to. I'm reminded as well of a beautiful principle that I learned about Yeshivat Har Etzion in Israel, and that is that they have a plaque to all of fallen students who fell in battle and acts of terror. They have memorial plaques, and there's no room at the end of the plaque. It's not the kind of plaque like one would honor presidents of an organization or whatnot and leave room for next generations. When they prepare this plaque, they fill it in its entirety. There's no room left to add other names, because the hope and the belief is that no names will need to be added, because this is the end of violence, because this is the end of war. And it's not only a belief, it's built into the structure of Jewish law. when it comes to the inheritance, and our Torah says, Hu uvanav, that the king and his children, and that the children of the king have the rights of inheritance, and the children of some of the important Kohanim and high priests have inheritance rights, have precedence. But when it comes to positions that relate to war and to military and to fighting, there is no inheritance, because that should not be transferred from one generation to the next. We are an extraordinarily optimistic people, and that's what's, I believe, kept us afloat in many dark times in our history, and that's what allows us to continue, and that's what allows us to we pray, be a beacon of light unto the world, and that we believe that with the right actions, with the right efforts, with the right gestures, with the right faith, that tomorrow will be better than today, and will be better than yesterday was. That's our belief, and that's the belief that carries us into this Shabbat and into every moment. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom, a Shabbat of safety and health and blessing in every way. May our prayers be answered, and look forward to seeing all of us back in Shul together very soon. But in the meantime, Shabbat Shalom.